Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name's Dr. James Gill and you join me for another clinical skills adjacent video. You see, a lot of the time we'll hear people talking about vitamin D, and I'm frequently asked to check vitamin D levels at work. But I thought it might be worthwhile to do a bit of a supplementation video about vitamin D. You see, vitamin D is not actually a vitamin. Some / most / a lot of the time. Let me explain. How can a chemical change whether it is or isn't something? You see, the definition of a vitamin is an organic compound that is required for an organism to live, but crucially cannot be synthesized by that organism. To that end, you'd imagine the very first vitamin would be vitamin A. But actually that wasn't the case. Vitamin B1 was discovered in 1926, although the concept of a vital amine was identified, or at least coined, in 1912. Vitamin D3, or cholecalciferol, the sunshine vitamin as a lot of people will describe it, is made in the skin. We know that, so surely that means it's not a vitamin by that very definition. Unless, that is, you live in a part of the world where at certain times of the year the sunlight is not strong enough to enable vitamin D production, in which case the body can't produce the cholecalciferol and you're required to consume it through your diet, i.e. it's a vitamin. So where in the world would you have to be that cholecalciferol becomes a vitamin? Surely it's got to be something like the Arctic or something like that. Well, actually, it's a little bit more complex than just whereabouts you live, as your skin type will also affect the vitamin D generation. I mean, nobody's going to be surprised to find that people of Scandinavian origin and other origins around that latitude have the ability to produce higher amounts of vitamin D for a set unit of sun exposure than other skin types. But putting the complicating factor of skin colour aside, the UK's National Institute for Clinical Excellence states that latitudes above 37 degrees, sunlight containing UVB radiation is limited, i.e. over the winter your vitamin D level in production in the skin is going to be negligible. Now, despite having been a scout in my younger days, I was a little surprised to find that 37 degrees north is actually kind of level with the Mediterranean Sea. I'd naively thought it was going to be somewhere like Scotland or above. Basically, between October and March, above 37 degrees north, but certainly for the entirety of the UK, the sun doesn't rise high enough in the sky for us to produce enough vitamin D from those UVB rays. Now, why does it matter, as I said, the sun doesn't rise high enough in the sky?
Thank you for watching this far in the vitamin D video. I'd like to give you something, and I do mean that literally. I've been trying to think about ways that I could potentially monetize the channel, and honestly, most of them I don't like. So what I've decided to do, rather than charge students for things, which I'm just going to give it away for free. So the script that I've written for this vitamin D video, because it does help me to write out what I'm going to say sometimes before I do so, you can have it. And I'm going to do that with all future sort of long form videos like this. I'm going to have the script and I'm going to let you guys download it. And to try and help myself with that, I've actually partnered up with a company called UPDF, and they're going to help me to take the scripts that I have for you and convert them into PDFs that you can keep, annotate, write on, or whatever. And I think that's a way that works for me to give to you guys and at the same time be able to monetize the channel. In terms of using UPDF, I would say download it. There's a link in the description where you can download it and have it as a way of storing the PDFs that I'm going to give you. And you can annotate, write notes across those documents and use them, hopefully, as revision tools. And crucially, from my perspective, although I'm confident in the things that I've written, I always think it's worthwhile to double check things. There is the option to use the AI part of the software to actually check, have I made any glaring errors that I need to myself review from alternative sources, my textbooks and things, before I send those out to you. So please have a look at UPDF. You can see the link in the description, and also please click on the link to download the vitamin D script. Hopefully it'll be useful for yourself, and if so, please put any comments and things about how you found the script and extra things that you'd like us to build into them over time. So this is the first one that I've done, so basically it's straightforward. Here's my cognitive vitamin D vomit, if you will. However, depending on what those feedback comments are, we might add more, references, potentially put in questions and things like that, and answers as well. And we'll hopefully build more interactive PDFs using the UPDF system as well. So back to the regular video, but please have a look at these and hopefully it should be useful for yourselves.
Now, why does it matter that I said the sun doesn't rise high enough in the sky? See, over winter, when the sun stays low near the horizon, following that more GCSE geography, that sunlight is passing through an awful lot of ozone and general atmosphere, i.e. we get a lot of that vitamin D absorbed by that interfacing. Therefore, the sunlight that actually hits our skin is insufficient to generate that vitamin D. Also, the fact that we're only exposing our face and hands means that almost nothing is going to be produced at that time, so we kind of have a vitamin D winter. As such, the current recommendations are that everybody in the UK should take approximately 400 international units of vitamin D daily, unless there are reasons for extra caution, e.g. patients with hypercalcemia, that being raised levels of calcium, chronic kidney disease, renal stones, or potentially certain medications like digoxin. They should avoid supplementary vitamin D unless told explicitly to by their doctor. The point about hypercalcemia, raised calcium, is particularly important, as vitamin D will increase the absorption of calcium from the intestine, making an already raised calcium level even higher. Then we'll run into medical risks of hypercalcemia, which at medical school were taught the aid memoir of stones, bones, moans, and psychic groans. These highlight that hypercalcemia can cause renal stones, bone pain, as calcium is often being pulled from the bones, abdominal groans because of constipation and abdominal pain, potentially nausea and vomiting, and also pancreatitis. And finally, there's psychic groans because we can get depression, memory loss, fatigue, and impaired concentration. All can happen with raised levels of calcium, giving us those psychic groans in the aid memoir. It's also worthwhile highlighting we can also get an irregular heartbeat, but for some reason that doesn't fit into their aid memoir. Now, we suggest that people should perhaps have no more than 400 international units, 400 IU. Now that might seem a little bit low, but there is a reason. Vitamin D can also be toxic, so it's why we say most people can take safely 400 international units, and certainly nobody should be taking more than 4,000 international units daily unless they've been advised to by their doctor because of toxic levels of vitamin D. So why might we suggest that somebody does take more than 500 international units of vitamin D? Well, firstly, if they test deficient, but we'll come to that later. You see, end-stage renal disease might need vitamin D supplementation, as the kidneys produce the 1,2,5-dihydroxy vitamin D. If you've got renal disease, then you're not producing that precursor that the sun is going to be able to convert to the vitamin D3 in the skin. Liver disease can also impair vitamin D production, and low-fat diets can reduce vitamin D intake. Certain medications, those that reduce fat absorption, like orlistat or cholestyramine, can reduce your vitamin D absorption. because vitamin D is one of the DAKE vitamins that are all fat soluble. Steroids, laxatives can also reduce vitamin D absorption, and some anticonvulsants can actually increase vitamin D breakdown, so going to push your levels lower. We mentioned the possibility of being found to have low vitamin D levels, but even at that point, there is a debate about the levels of deficiency versus insufficiency. Firstly, when you're dealing with things like that, you need to make sure that your vitamin D levels that you're reading are the same. So often it's discussed in nanomoles per litre and nanograms per milliliter. And actually, those two values can look quite similar at a simple glance. In the UK, we use nanomoles per litre, but even so, there's going to be a debate as to where our actual thresholds are. One source will say 25 nanomoles per litre is deficient. Conversely, you'll find another one that says that 30 to 70 nanomoles per litre is insufficient, whereas a third one is going to tell you that 50 nanomoles per litre is the threshold for deficiency. One possible reason for this, perhaps, is that not all vitamin D tests are created equal. There can be up to a 40% variability in the outcome of some tests. So when we're doing testing medically, we need to make sure we're using the gold standard, that being a liquid chromatograph test. i.e., if you're buying your test in the shops, I would put some considerable question mark on the data that that's providing you. So given there are confounding variables, as well as looking at the tests you're using, you need to look at your source material. The Royal Society for Osteoporosis in 2018 stated that the 50 nanomoles per litre is sufficient for most people. As ever, there is a raft of conflicting data here. Some studies will say that 75 to 125 nanomoles per litre range is sufficient and in fact might be protective for certain types of cancer. Conversely, the Food Nutrition Board in America will say that between 70 and 120 nanomoles per litre of vitamin D has been associated with an increase in all causes of mortality. So you're really changing from one hand to the other. So I go back to that comment from the Royal Osteoporosis Society that sufficiency should be about 50 nanomoles per litre in most people. In reality, what we can probably infer is that 50 to 75 nanomoles is probably the sweet spot, and at greater levels, particularly when we're getting the 200 nanomole per litre level, are going to be considered to be toxic. Now that does bring me back to the idea of taking 400 international units daily over winter. Now, given that we should ideally be using sunscreen to protect our skin from sun damage throughout the rest of the year, there is guidance from the NHS on taking 400 international units of vitamin D daily across the year, as would be appropriate for those who are using sunscreen in sunnier weather. The issue with thresholds is that they feed into problematic research on vitamin D. There are studies looking at vitamin D with regard to mood modulation, but as you'll see, although we do know that vitamin D has a relationship with producing serotonin, it's far from clear-cut in terms of what does what when you look at the data. A meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, which for clarification is probably the silver medal when it comes to the best form of research, that suggested that when patients were supplemented with vitamin D, there was seen to be a moderate improvement in depression. However, when we looked at non-patients, there was no change in mood or depression type features, but not symptoms, in non-patients when they had vitamin D supplementation. Conversely, other studies have found no benefit in depression supplementation in patients, so we've got conflicts there. It's probable that there is a benefit from vitamin D and food, even possibly sleep. However, People will often joke there's a big difference between shop-bought serotonin and natural sources. We may see a similar thing with vitamin D. Taking a small 400 international unit vitamin D supplement over the winter period is likely to keep our levels within healthy ranges, which might be associated with positive health benefits. But come summer, being out in the natural sunshine, the warmth, the positivity of seeing the light coming through the trees or bouncing off the windows at you, all of those are going to be associated with positive health benefits and positive mental health changes. So it's going to be very difficult to separate those changes being as a result of being out in the sun and the positivity that causes us versus the increase in vitamin D that we will see from that being out in the sun. As for me, under the grey skies of the UK, I'm going to be taking my vitamin D supplement, but I'm also going to head outside as soon as I can when the weather finally starts to shed the gloomy grey of winter. So I hope that's been a useful overview for you on how vitamin D levels are tested and the cautions about shop-bought vitamin D testing versus those that your doctor's going to be able to do, and understanding whether or not it might be worthwhile speaking to your doctor about supplementation or testing if you are concerned that you might have an issue there. With that in mind, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.